the easy parts, you only have to do the hard parts. Are my hands freakishly huge, and is that why everything slips through my fingers? Let's get canceled. Let's get canceled together. If I get canceled, I want to get canceled together. Exclusion is a gift, a silver medal, the end of youth, a couple packs of my favorite snacks. Dr. Dre, not Dr. Seuss. No tenants and no trees, no snowmobiles and no skis. Call your doctor immediately if you faceplant in the salad bowl. I'm doing this out of sheer boredom, over an Apple Store employee type beat. Sometimes I wonder if a single good thing exists on Earth, and then I eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Everything is boring now.
Welcome to the Tottenham Weekly Podcast, in which we break down Tottenham's goals, one excruciating loss at a time.
It was an exciting match, though.
That is an in-joke. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books. This is the 2-month review weekly podcast where we take this season, William Gaddis is JR, talk about it in sections. I'm joined by Nick During, the publicist from New York Review of Books, and special guest Samuel Rutter, who is the translator of Magnetized, Conversations with a Serial Killer, along with books by Mateus Saladon, Sonia Hernandez, and Selva Almada. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Well, thanks for inviting us on, Chad.
That intro was a bit of an in-joke because we had to cancel our normal slot for watching or for recording this because Nick had to watch Tottenham play Everton.
Actually, it turned out I had a meeting that I had forgotten about anyway, so I would have. But I did not watch soccer while being at the spring 2022 meeting.
No.
Definitely not.
No, never. Never.
I don't know if either of you watch soccer while reading this because it demands constant attention.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. No, I can listen to music, but not. I can't have anything else going with this.
I think you could watch cricket in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, too.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of like the one of the great things, and just glancing again at our part, Bast's earplug thing.
Oh my God.
A suggestion that therefore everything he's writing down, he's just parroting what he's hearing on the radio.
Which is quite possible. Yeah.
He's not. He's just like actually writing down stuff that he's hearing.
And earlier too with the zebra music, isn't there, where the guy's trying to write his own score while listening to the radio, and that sort of, I think, was a bit like, it's kind of like a metaphor for how you read the book, isn't it? Sort of like
This section was another one of the sections where, like, just so anyone listening, we go up to page 647. This was another one of the sections where it was super claustrophobic for me. Yeah. That apartment at 96 gets worse and worse and worse, and like I started to lose it. But before we get into it, so Nick, I have actually a question for you, but it's in form of a statement to correct something. So we talked about, we had Dan O'Brien on to talk about this from a playwriting perspective. And we talked about the possibility of it being a play, of a TV show, all these things. It is a play. There is a production in Belgium. I'm frozen. Hold on, I'm going to be back.
You are frozen, yeah.
Trust the Belgians to put, like, what, 200,000 euros into
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't see.
Okay. Can't see me, but you can hear me. That's good enough. Yeah. So it's performed by. So I was talking to my class, my students, for the literary class, and I was like, oh, there's this book they're reading, JR. It's got all these like sort of sequences to it. There's like patterns. It's not a normal pattern. You have to pay attention to stuff. And the one student's like, oh, I know this book. There's like this experimental play performance of it in Belgium. And I was like, what? And he sent the video of it, and I'll send it to you, Nick, after this. But yeah, so it does exist, and it was being performed. There's some pictures on here, not a lot of information, but it was performed from March 2018 right up until March 22nd, 2020.
It's a long run. That's not bad.
Yeah,
that reminds me of the guy who won one of those super mega lottos in America, like $500 million, and he put money towards a stage adaptation of Roberto Bolaño's 2666, which I think they had like 5 performances before.
There were articles about that, right? That was the story, wasn't it?
5-hour play as well.
Yeah.
So how did you?
I mean, I don't know. I didn't follow this carefully. Chad, you might know more. Gaddis did write screenplays plays. I think more for film, and there is like a kind of cinematic. Certain cinematic things going on in JR.
Weren't they?
What was that?
I thought they were like corporate training videos and education videos.
I think he does some real stuff too.
That I'm not. I think so too, but I don't know the specifics. I know the corporate stuff, and the corporate stuff is really funny to think about. Like having like and all the parts in here with the business stuff totally makes sense. My camera won't turn on anyone, so anyone you're just not going to see me. But who cares? I guess I can take my clothes off now.
You can watch soccer.
The corporate parts of this business, you can hear me unzip my sweatshirt actually. The corporate parts of it are always the ones that I get kind of like semi lost in or like sort of glaze over a bit because I'm like, I'm not quite following what all these tax write-off, all that kind like I can't really piece all that together, but it has like such authenticity in the way that it reads that it's like absolutely you know that that's what he was doing. He was working for those places. I
agree. Particularly I mean, I think when JR is talking or when JR is not talking and say Bast is talking and you kind of have to guess what JR is saying are some of the funniest parts. When in the Typhon offices, when the Governor Cates or whoever is speaking, it's pretty hard to follow. That's when I find claustrophobic.
I think too, like it's you kind of know when JR jumps back in because there'll be some kind of like spoonerism or he'll be
holy, lots of holies.
Holy boy. Holy
shit, man. I mean
I wondered going through how much of it is accurate. It made me think a bit of that bit in like American Psycho, how Bret Easton Ellis, he's constantly describing the outfits in super designer outfits and I kind of glazed all over that when I read it, but there was this blog for a while that put those outfits together, and I think the joke was meant to be that the clothes didn't go together, that it was meant to be absurd. And I wonder if you've had anyone on the podcast who can like pass all this financial information, if it's absolutely bonkers what he's saying, or if there's like maybe, we've seen the GameStop thing happen the last couple of weeks, maybe closer attention.
Yeah, there are moments where he like references like hedging and short sells and that all that stuff is real. So
margins
place.
Because I was thinking of putting the check that you're sending me for appearing on the podcast, Chad, just like
So Kaya, we've been using Robinhood, which is clearly at the center of part of this, or one part of that GameStop story. And for years now, and all I own are weed stocks. As I've said many times on here, is I just got the free stocks and I trade them and bought weed. And weed is like skyrocketing right now. And I'm like, I'm badass. Like I win. Kaya invested in Chewy, the pet supply chain, way before any of this. That's skyrocketed. And then for whatever reason, she put $20 into Dogecoin, which was then manipulated through this thing. And she made like $450.
You live in Rochester. You don't even have any Kodak stock.
Yeah, right.
Is Kodak even listed?
Yeah. Wait, gas works for Kodak, by the way, right?
Yeah.
It says on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gaddis did, yeah.
Yeah, Gaddis, not gas. You said gas in the second one too. See, it's
for a second I thought you said Sam worked for.
No, I said gas. I was getting confused.
So wait, I have a question to go back before we get into this section too. Is like, how did both of you come to read Gaddis or this book?
I can answer that very, very easily. I get paid to.
You hadn't read it before?
No.
Sam?
I guess so. For me, look, the short answer to is my friendship with Nicholas. He, belted me over the head first with Recognitions, which was one that I really did enjoy, and I ended up writing about it for Paris Review. And then he was like, let's do it. Let's do this one. And I thought, heck it, who cares? Another 800 pages. But he was an author that I'd always known about. But unlike Nick, I grew up all the way through in Australia, and you just couldn't find the Gaddis books. Too. You couldn't get it. There was I remember seeing once the Penguin edition, but it was one of those books that people talked about, but you couldn't find anywhere. So.
What is it? Yeah. So wait, what part of you're from Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
And Nick, you're from...
I grew up in Sydney.
That's right. I thought you were from Sydney. Okay. So what is the... I'm curious because we have a lot of like Australian subscribers and like followers. And it seems that we have this like really vibrant like scene of people who are reading interesting books. But I don't know if that's like a bias an accessibility bias because every single one of them is on Twitter like tweeting, and it's just those people. What is the literary scene and like things like what you just mentioned? What is it like in Australia?
I think for me, what I would say is, in a big term, Australia's always been a small part of a big culture in terms of English. So I think, we're a little bit more attuned to receiving and consuming all kinds of media, whether it's shows, movies, music that are from elsewhere. So I think, that might play into your hands, Chad, with the open letter thing. I think there's maybe a little bit, everyone's got this thing, they call it the cultural cringe, which apparently the idea is that, being from Australia, you think that whatever interesting is happening in the world, it couldn't possibly be happening in Australia. It's got to be happening elsewhere. So there might be a case of a bit of an eye on the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. That might be something to do with it. What do you think, Nick?
I mean, I left when I was younger, so I don't know as much as you. And I guess I wonder whether a lot of it is Sydney and Melbourne. And I think outside of Sydney, my dad lives in Brisbane, and he thinks, he's a bit of a snob anyway, but he thinks there's no good bookstores in Brisbane. And Brisbane is a pretty big city.
There is that one. I forgot what it's called, but it's good.
That one.
Yeah. No, that's mean. But it is, it's tough to, I remember like this time we're talking about when I was still there trying to get these sorts of books and trying to get books in translation. I'll be honest, I was one of those people who I would use things like Book Depository, which had a free shipping worldwide.
Yeah.
And you could get books sent to your home for a price that was a lot less than going into, say, a bookstore that I really love, like Readings or Glebe Books, asking them to order it in, waiting for it to come in.
Paying a lot.
Yeah. And so that's been always a challenge, I think, in Australia is like as well, the publishing zoning and all that sort of stuff. Like,
yeah,
we would be getting English editions of things, and sometimes then it'd be tough to get, say, Delphi archive stuffs if you didn't subscribe directly, and then open letter, same deal. But I think it's changing, which is good.
Yeah. And Sydney and Melbourne, you can get it. I mean, you might have to pay more, but
it's at least available.
It's available.
Yeah.
Nick, what was it like publicizing this book? Or your Gaddis relaunch in general?
Well, it's pretty easy. I mean, the one lesson I've learned about publicizing people is if their names are recognized, it's much easier than if their names aren't recognized. And Williams Gaddis's name is recognized.
You heard it, Fred.
It's like bestsellers are bestsellers.
Bestsellers are bestsellers are bestsellers. Yeah.
People are well known.
To quote our overlords.
Can I ask a question, Nick?
Yeah.
Because I read a bit about how, the estate had been unhappy in the past with, say, how Penguin had handled it. And then, there was an edition with Dolkey, and now you guys are doing it. Is there sort of like a lot of involvement with Gaddis? No, it's just
not publicity.
Yeah.
No, I haven't been in touch with anybody.
Right.
Have I? No, I got some photos from somebody, but yeah, I don't know.
From what I could see from the Delkey thing, it wasn't the estate that was that was part of it. It was an employee and the Wiley agency that were the problem.
I mean,
I'm not on the screen, so that can't be held by any normal legal standards. So
yeah.
I think you're having a deep sip of beer as you
already.
I am.
Yeah, I've only listened to the first 2 episodes, and you and Edwin already you hedged around things with Edwin, and then on the episode 2, the young woman who works at Tin House was on and had bought the book, the Dolkey ebook, and you said you shouldn't, don't worry. Sarah Kramer, be careful. It's fine. I'm taking it down. So you've done your duty. Don't worry.
It's so funny because I took it down, but like somehow like it got reposted. It's like Amazon.
As you know, Amazon doesn't care. Anyway, but back to your original question, and I guess, you know, I'm speaking a little bit for Sam, but also about me and not the professional part of reading this. I guess I am. This is maybe a bit of a kind of white male-y thing, but like I'm always intrigued by the big, you know, big bulky masterpiece. And so I'd heard of Gaddis before, and I never read the Franzen review until this stuff. But then I was like, oh, big, scary, difficult book. I want to give it a shot.
What did you think of the Franzen article? We had one episode with Ryan Chapman where we really went into that, since Ryan's a big Franzen fiction fan.
Yeah. What did Ryan say?
he said the same thing about, like, we all kind of agreed about the essay, but to varying degrees, of that it's like clearly a very jealous, weird essay where he's coming from like a point where he's trying to prove himself, but prove like he's also of the people, and then it's really like off. It's just off key in so many ways. And like I found it like that was right. We did that episode right during like the insurrection. We were supposed to have the episode, but the insurrection started
on Wednesday.
Yeah. So, but and then when I reread it, I was like, man, this is the same sort of language that's bled into like the divided, crazy country is the language that he was using in there, of like both like justifying his own point of view and condemning the other simultaneously. And I thought it's like a really bad essay. I think it's dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it's been a while since I read it, and I guess this is leading into a question I'd like to ask Sam, which is, I don't like it now, and I don't think I liked it then. I don't like it now because even though JR is difficult because of the unattributed dialogue, I actually don't think JR is harder to read than the recognitions. No. And so him just saying recognitions is great, but the other stuff I couldn't, don't bother. It's like, seems pretty stupid. And the question that I'm asking Sam, which he doesn't have to answer right now, but I'm curious, is does he like the recognitions or the JR better, and why?
Well, I think, to go back to the Franzen thing, I read it and it primed me to think, this is before I'd ever read any Gaddis at all, and I was primed me to think that the recognitions was going to be this super difficult and dense book. And I think I agree with you, Chad. I found it to be, you know, I don't know if we're allowed to say, but a pretty pissy sort of an attitude that was taken, which was all underlying. The underlying thing to me was, if I find this difficult or whatever, then it simply must be because I'm Jonathan Franzen. Yeah. And I didn't like that attitude much. But I think, again, you know, circling back to that idea of elites and white male and all that sort of stuff too, I'm one of those people who's in a bit of a position with recognitions where there's huge chunks of it in French, chunks of it in Spanish, that, you know, I was able to, which I've done, schoolboy Latin. So in that sense, I can see why it rubs people the wrong way, but I didn't find it as difficult to read as JR in an ongoing sense. I found
interesting.
JR, I found to be, I think, Nick, you might have said it as we were texting, it's a little bit unrelenting. It's a lot of the same, which I found I could really get into the structure of the recognitions, and I found the characters a little bit more individualized, which helps, I think. And I could see the doubling. I could see the structure working in a different way to the JR thing, which to me, again, I think I read it. I'll be honest with you, Chad, like this crept up on me and I've had to bomb through this in about 10 days, which is not how
which is a lot.
But on the other hand, that is kind of what Gaddis himself said. He said to sort of read it, you know, just to plow through it and read it like it's this conversation that's happening around you. So I think, you know, I think, you know, if you go one or the other, I did find JR more challenging in that sense.
So yeah, that's interesting. I just think of them, I've always thought of them as separate. Like everyone wanted to make like, can you compare them? But they're two totally different approaches to like a similar set of themes or idea of like the counterfeit or the not quite, where something like the words and the creation don't match the act. And like, there's that gap he explores, and like recognitions is wonderful and beautiful in its own right. It is just so different. Like the structures, the different chapters, the different ways that it like the different techniques he uses. Whereas this is one unrelenting technique, but that too is amazing because it's like, how could you sustain this? Like,
I think too, like I think a lot's been said about how just sort of the Protestant aspects of both projects. But I was really interested in the way sort of striving occurs on the page in a different way. In Recognitions, I think just personally, I had a bit more to grab onto with all of the different people striving to be, you know, for want of a bit of a term, artists, whereas the way the striving was happening in JR was a little bit more, I guess it's just a little bit more soul crushing.
Yeah.
But
I swear to God, like the overwhelming amount of detritus really, like, I have to pause sometimes. Like it's too much, right?
It's pretty bleak.
It feels a little bit too close to home because my parents are hoarders and like they sometimes listen to this. So I apologize, Mom. I apologize, Dad. But like the idea of our basement having all those things falling over and all this stuff there and like hit that and it's like, oh. I have a question for you, Nick. That's really before we can get into the actual sections. But so the beginning of the Joy Williams introduction has the quote from William Gaddis on writing a novel. That quote is in the section that we're covering. It's on page 640, and it is actually Gibbs that says it.
Yeah.
But it is the same exact quote of Gaddis on writing a novel. 16 years like living with a goddamn invalid. 16 years every time you come in sitting there just waiting like you left him, wave a stick at you, plump up a pillow, cut a paragraph out of sentence. That whole long rant about writing. I didn't remember that was a quote from the book. When I read it in the beginning of her introduction, I was like, that sounds vaguely familiar, but like, you know, in every way. It's kind of interesting. So I don't know. I don't know if I have a question, but that seems kind of.
Why didn't they attribute it to the book, and why do they say it? I have no idea.
So William sort of takes it as a metaphor, or as like a way of Gaddis describing his own gap between books, right? The 20-year gap.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the quote ends William Gaddis on writing a novel, when actually, as Chad points out, it's Gibbs speaking. Yeah. To himself, probably.
And then the next line is a magnificent example of a rant. A perfect example, really. Recognitions was his first novel. It was 7 years in construction. JR, his second, took more than twice that long. So it really does connect it to that quote. And when I was like, whoa, I forgot that was in there.
Yeah.
I guess it's been so long since I last read this. But like so many parts of it are like still very, 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 very clear. And so many parts of it, of like the overall structure of like what happens to people, don't remember, don't care. I just remember scenes.
And I think just after that bit too, on 641, I noted down, he starts talking about agape as a possible title. And and I guess that's why it's easy to think, well, is this authorial hand of Gaddis jumping in? But I think, I remember when I was writing in the Recognitions, going back and just same sort of thing, remembering one character saying something and that being important, and then you realize it's someone else has said it. But I think this novel in particular, there's like, I don't know, it's not quite, doubling and tripling of characters, but the idea of following the thread of who's saying what is kind of the whole thing, like the whole game of telephone or whatever you call it.
All the leitmotifs. So like when things show up and then they get reversed sort of on the next page or like the next section, there's frequently like use of that, of like point and counterpoint, I guess is the maybe musical term. I don't know music. I am tone deaf and everything, but like I feel like the musical terms that exist that I've heard before feel like they're present in this book in a very textual way, which I find absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
I feel like that's the same way I read the Recognitions, which is there's all this emphasis on triptychs and finished painting, and that's not there for nothing. So I took that as a way to read into them. This is a book that opens with, it's interested in Wagnerian operatic cycles. We know the great thing about Bast, who's starts with an opera, he's starting to get down into cantata, and then I think he ends up with, is it like a unaccompanied cello suite?
An oratorio at one point.
So, and then there's the player piano too, which So I think you're not wrong there, Chad, in terms of I think Gaddis was always like very crotchety about people overanalyzing and looking for references, but I think you can't have it both ways. You can't ask for a deep reading and a proper understanding of your novel, and also say, well, don't read too deep. But
there was a what's interesting, like to me, as you say that, is that this opens up with the money scene, the infamous like money scene, where it really is about representation. Like that the dollar bill stands for money makes no sense to them. Like that's weird. And there is like the idea of like reading into metaphors. So there's the Gaddis tradition and there's the kind of the Pynchon tradition, where Pynchon uses every one of those things as a metaphor for something grander, and you have to kind of dig into and understand the metaphor to be able to see what he's doing on a different level. Whereas Gaddis keeps it very on the surface. It is on the surface. It is that representation is being spoken because it's spoken all the time. Like all these people that you hear in the airport that are talking on their Bluetooth ear sets about Excel spreadsheets to whomever, like it sounds like Davidoff. It sounds like these people just being like, oh yeah, it's all of this, but what is it? 16 2/3 down, $200 loan, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it reminds me of a different Delkey author, Gilbert Sorrentino, who John would always say was like, I don't know if any of this is true, but John would say that he had no depth perception, like that he had no depth perception. And that's why in his writing, he was always like, metaphors I don't even understand them. They're dumb. Like everything is what it is on the surface. And in a way, this is like what it is on the surface.
It is interesting too, because of all of these companies and stocks, none of them, because they're, you know, penny stocks and whatever, none of them are doing the thing that their name says they are, you know, when it's Catania Paving or whatever it is. So this idea of pure surface as well is interesting, because it does come back to the dollar sign. And there's that bit, I think it's just before our section, of all those corporate logos with the dollar signs and the breasts and the whatever.
Just right.
And I think that was something that, you know, not to go back to the comparison, but that's what one of the other things I found a little bit challenging reading through was you kind of come fairly quickly to what the book is about, which is sort of the just unabashed greed and shallowness of the way that the, you know, money and stocks go in this mode of capitalism. You know, as opposed to what you're saying, Chad, about how all of the laws of thermodynamics that Pynchon makes you walk through, it's usually a stepping stone to something else also, even though it can be, you know, pretty impenetrable as well.
I feel like Pynchon's one of the big differences, aside from like the metaphor versus flatness, the difference between the two for me is that Gaddis doesn't see a way out, and Pynchon has a mystical side to him, and that's always what I was drawn to, is that sort of like, here's the entropic world, but is there another possibility? Does the rainbow continue through the other side? Does it make a circle and we only see half of it? And that's very intriguing. I can't find the second commercial, but when you're talking about the logo thing, we get an ad for JR in the middle of our section.
Yeah, the JR family of companies. Yeah,
was that 22? No, 614. Sorry, 614. And it's Alpaca, which is a joke title that I used for one of these podcasts that we never made reference to the joke. But for his Alaska essay that JR writes about mining Alaska, essentially, he misspells Alaska as Alsaca. And like one of the great gags through the last week's episode and this week's episode is that JR is coming up with these childishly insane ideas, and people are trying to like implement them. And we'll get to the main one in a second, but this one, Alsaca, like it's because he said that, Alsaca Development, working day and night to bring the American family its full share of the world's energy. Alsaca, a proud member of the JR family of companies. When you see a product, a service, a promise of human betterment for all, if it's JR, it's just right. JR, an American family of American and then cuts off. It's just like such a great ad read. But the other one that we didn't talk about last week that I want to bring up is, what is it called? It's not Frigid Air. It's something like that, where he has the idea that they will freeze sound waves and take them apart and throw them into the ocean. And is like, and they're like, this sounds like, you know, the most insane, like a 12-year-old came up with this. And you're like, yeah, 12-year-old came up with it. And then in this part, there's a reference to where it's like, the environmental impact of sending sound waves that have been shattered into like the marine life. And it's so funny to take those things seriously. But then you have people in our world like Elon Musk who can say any random fucking thing he wants. Like, I'm gonna shoot out a rocket and fly to the moon, and then shoot out another rocket and fly to Mars. And we're like, oh, you're a hero.
Well, did you read that thing last week? The headline was that we'd taught spinach to email. It wasn't quite that, but it was they'd found a way to use phosphorescent emissions or something from spinach plants to effectively give notifications. So, and then Elon Musk as well is trying to they're implanting chips inside of monkeys so that they can play video games inside their own head, which that's not JR. That's like, you know. And isn't he now the richest individual in the world?
What's that?
Yeah.
Something like that. So
yeah.
Yep. I continue to remain concerned about Grimes' health.
Yeah. And you make your bed, you lie, I guess.
There is the other part of this book, which I think is similar to the recognitions, where the and in our section with the both with Bast and his music, and he starts to question what he's doing when he kind of has a real relationship with Rhoda, and also Gibbs having his breakdown when he realizes, or maybe you as reader realize, that his book is not going to be very good.
It's never going to be written, man.
And that, you know, because, and you can't help but think, I mean, what is Gaddis is doing, you know, like, because he's doing like, you know, Sam is an author, like, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I writing this?
Sam's book, which mind you, Sam's book begins with something about pigeons instead of money and goes from there.
Yeah, you have to make it as crazy as possible.
There are no baby pigeons.
I think, you know, small. It's got to be small. Yeah, that's true. That is, Chad and I had a long discussion on a train in Norway about how come you never see baby pigeons, which...
And my weird random explanation ended up being factually true, but
they like take a day to become normal size.
Yeah, they're just like, it's just too fast.
I'm not sold. You're so. Do you ever see a bird that's just died? No.
Yes.
No, you don't. They're always small or something.
You have to live out in the country, man.
They go to like in a little hole to die, like an elephant or something.
Corpses of birds in the parks and stuff.
Yeah, they're never just like alive and then die.
You've never seen a bird die?
I've woken up and there's been like a dead budgie in the bird cage. That's happened for sure.
I think we should go back to
watch birds die. It's sad.
It's like, you know, Schrodinger's cat. How long, if you shake the cage, how long will the bird stay alive?
Oh man, I have to say, you brought this up, but Rhoda as a character, this section is her like moment. This is her vehicle for the book. She's so good.
I felt like I was in Kramer's apartment this time.
Yeah.
Like dumb business ideas and like bills in the ice cube tray, and yeah, it's sort of like you know, I think Gaddis wanted to be thought of as more funny than he was, and you both have said you felt a little claustrophobic, but I did find this section to be a bit more funny than some of the other ones.
Okay, so this, I think the whole thing's actually, I find it all very funny. There is a claustrophobic part, and you can focus on that, or you can let it be funny. Yeah. And it's like the same thing. It's like a comedian that you're like, that's a lot of aggressive shit that coming at me, or you're like, it's also funny. One of our listeners, Chris Olson, who's in Osaka, said, last summer I was sitting on a park bench and was attacked by a bird who died in midair and landed on my lap.
Whoa.
Scared the shit out of me. So there you go.
That is insane.
That is evidence that birds aren't controlled by the government as robots.
Well,
maybe Chris has a secret that they were trying to get.
I'll have to send Chris a postcard. So that's fantastic to know, Chris. But
yeah, I was looking back at the Rhoda one. I'll just read. This is the part when Al has gone off. Al, for those who don't know, is Rhoda's mate, who's a musician. When he plays, it sounds plunk-a-plunk-a-plunk. and he doesn't know music notation. And when Bast asks him,
I love this bit.
he's like, "Man, I don't do other people's music. I just play, man." And
Why would
then
I
he
want
goes on to get his welfare check, and he's getting welfare checks in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And Bast, who is a good boy, starts to think, "Oh, this is a ripoff." And Rhoda says, "Come off it, man. Like other people, I mean, like who? Like, I mean, someone's getting paid to be this weather forecaster someplace, telling you fair and warm while you're like up to your ass in this blizzard. I mean, like, who does anything, man? I mean, someone gets a job, and like the first thing they do, they try to figure out how to not do it. I mean, look at you, man. Like the business job with all this mail and calls and these presents. Like, only you're up all night trying to make this $400 writing this music for some band that's getting this money free to play it. Like, I mean, what's the difference if you get help off that and now gets it off this welfare? I mean, like, you're both in music, and like you weren't even very nice to him, man."
Both of I thought you were going to steal my lines of the week, but I have 2 lines of the week, and they're both Rhoda's, and they're gorgeous. Oh, I'll tell you when we get to the end. The other one that I didn't include was like, "Hey, man, you want a ball?"
Yeah.
So one of my favorite lines ever.
The other part in this where Bast is like, "Oh, don't throw out my my finance literature," and she's like, "Literature? You call this literature? This is crap." He's like, "Yeah, you're right. They just call it literature." He's like, "Don't call it literature, man. It's crap."
And when she opens his dividend from the Bell Telephone Company, it's like 15 cents.
Yeah, everything's like 15 cents.
The next envelope bill is $2,480.
The telephone bill thing is crazy. So yeah, Greenspan. I had one observation in this that I wasn't.
Alan Greenspan.
What's that?
I was read Alan Greenspan as well.
Alan Greenspan.
I mean, that's who comes to mind immediately.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Alan Greenspan was in the 1970.
He's working in finance.
Era, but that makes sense. So using his name and using that thing, the thing that I didn't remember that struck me this time was that Gibbs understands how this all works.
Yeah.
Like his acumen for it, and like he gets on the phone with people, and he's like, "Oh, well, what you should do is this." And that's how you use this thing, and like that would be the best. And like they start doing it, and then they're like, "Well, we can't move." Like, I mean, essentially, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but JR has essentially become an import-export company, which is one of the jokes from early on where he gets to like how to be an import-export, and they're like, why would I do that? That's dumb. But he's like importing all these like fucking like plastic flowers, like 100 gross of plastic flowers that they're going to put in the apartment, but he's always importing things to sell them to someone else. Like he's always like moving product around, but also not doing what he's supposed to do, like which is what you mentioned. Like he doesn't like the matchbooks. They get confused between the wallpaper company and the publishing house. Like everything keeps getting like sort of mixed up because they're not really real companies. They're just like
it's like shell companies, holding companies.
Except he manipulates it so well because when he buys the useless land, he turns it into near a funeral. He then buys a funeral company, and then so he can sell everybody who wants to invest in this like chain funeral company and put them all in the one useless land he has.
I love when that line about like he's talking about like making funerals more efficient, and like he's like, "Oh, what we should do is like bury them like 6 or 8 deep."
It's great.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at the section that we're meant to do, and there's one where back to Rhoda. Rhoda's reading the mail to Bass, and the mail is JR is an amazing reader, is a completely omnivorous reader. He's the perfect Gaddis reader, and so everything he has to have. And Rhoda's going through it, and one of them is this is a translator thing, Sam. Some company wants to sell you dirty words in foreign languages so you accidentally use them on your pitches, on your business pitches. And I was thinking like it's pretty funny, and also because you know how like say you work in publishing or you work in translation and you're like, fuck, I'm never gonna make any money doing this, and then you're like, but I've gone to college and I'm smart, right? I'll just come up with an idea and I'll make shitloads of money. And like everybody kind of thinks that. And like Gas is really good at saying we all think that we're going to make it and have these genius ideas and make money, but we probably won't, or some of us might. Who knows?
What's super funny is as you keep conflating Gas and Gaddis, is that have you seen the articles from Gass about how to the New York Times where they reviewed the Gaddis books and refer to them as being by him?
The intro to the Penguin edition.
No, intro to the Delky edition.
And the Penguin edition.
Is it in there?
I read
it. Gaddis, the same reviewer who reviewed JR for the Times, had done the recognitions. And he admitted in the review of JR that he never actually read the recognitions.
Well, I was going to ask you, this is something I circle back. I forgot to ask you this. But when you wrote your article for a Paris Review, did you read Fire the Bastards?
I did. I bought it. I wouldn't say like I read it cover to cover, but it's a really interesting book just as a book, I thought.
What is this?
So Fire the Bastards is amazing.
Yeah, it's this critic. Is it Jack Green is the name, right?
Yep.
And he was this sort of village personality who was so incensed by the poor reception that Recognitions got that he actually wrote a book called Fire the Bastards that collated and refuted every one of the dumb reviews that came out for it.
Which is in the book.
Yeah, it's like the rotten gin thing and all that, which are all anagrams of Recognitions. Yeah. Very good.
Well, they actually are reviews of Recognitions, I think.
Yeah.
And and the Fire the Bastards thing too also catches like when someone makes a mistake and it gets repeated a million times, like the telephone thing that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
I think too. You probably noticed more of this than I did, Nick. But looking at even the reviews and the articles that came out just this time for the republishing of the Recognitions, I would say half of the reviews were also talking about how misunderstood and under-reviewed it was at the time. And it's sort of this now. You can imagine in 100 years when, this is re-released again as like this crazy thing, it'll just be regurgitating this idea that it's never been read and even the reviewers are never reading it. But
same thing happened when we did Henry Green. All of the reviews have to be Henry Green.
It's so funny.
Like, how many times can you be under-recognized? Surely at one point you just become recognized.
I remember we had this conversation in a bar watching soccer, actually. So, like, we redid all of the same Henry Green books you did, and my job as a marketing person was to repitch them the same way you did. And then I left as we got the Gaddis books and had to do that same. It's so funny, like it's just this repetitive cycle of rediscovery and re-repetition of that moment.
Not that it's a bad thing, because the truth, nobody really does read these people. I mean, I know the sales numbers. Chad knows the sales numbers.
I don't know your sales numbers. I'd be curious.
Well, I mean, you can
hear them.
1,000 people who are going to buy William Gaddis and Henry Green. I mean, that's buy, let alone read.
I think they're far apart. When I was writing about it for Paris Review, I was very conscious of the fact that, one, I didn't want to write something along those lines I mentioned, which is just rehashing the critical reception. And I also had this sort of fear because he's still an author that's very beloved of the very serious sort of lit-bro critic people. So I also knew that you couldn't, not that you can with other books, but you couldn't just get away with waffling or some trifling idea about it. And I don't know, you'd know sales numbers and but I think that the people who do read these books tend to take them very seriously. I even think, that was one thing. I think it's in the Paris Review interview that Gaddis does where he sort of says, well, Recognitions is meant to be a big comic novel. It's meant to be an epic.
That's funny.
Sort of like Menopeian thing. And it's taken so seriously, I think, by some little tiny corners of the literary scene, which, I think same with this one, right? Reading it through at the clip that I did, that's when it's fun. It would be a bit of a chore otherwise, I think, if you're going to underline every line and chase down every reference.
But I still think, I think both JR and the Recognitions are great novels. I actually think JR might be better, and I can understand why people get super into it and teach it and study it and write books about it. I totally get that.
The craft of it's really interesting. The craft of both of them is really interesting. It really is. They are just, to me, they're still retain that they're both equally good. They're just different.
JR is amazing. I think the dialogue is pretty pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And the way that it can keep on going, I mean, a 750-page book without any, just in dialogue with no attributions and and making you laugh. It's pretty incredible stuff.
And we've talked about the interstitial parts that like move you from one scene to another, where like the French scene ends and the next French scene.
Do you like that stuff? I kind of not sure if I like that stuff that much.
Actually, I think if you read it slowly, I think it's amazing.
You have to read it twice to understand what's going on. That's the hard part.
You notice
those parts are impossible to read, to understand. Not impossible, but difficult.
The ones we were reading today, the sections, I noticed a lot more of the which he doesn't do as much, but all the descriptions of where the hands are moving in the several sex scenes was one of the few examples I thought of that sort of authorial or third person hand coming in was
I want to correct Sam, when we were texting and you said, we have to talk about the sex scene, and I said it's one of my least favorite parts. I didn't mean the Rhoda Bast sex scene. Actually great. I find the Gibbs Emily sex scene a little bit too.
Amy?
I think the Gibbs character maybe is my least favorite part of the book, except for when, of course, he goes down in flames, when he's like, somehow he's the loser and he's a drunk, and yet women can't.
Spoilers, Chad, is this allowed?
And he's got this. He doesn't do it. He just drinks all the time, and it is totally cynical. And yet he's this great artist. I didn't know if I quite.
You mean he's my idol?
Yeah, well, he might be your idol, but I didn't buy him as a real character. And I kind of prefer Eigen, who is totally compromised and a loser.
Are you talking about the section with Amy and Gibbs from the last part? We went through that, and I think that's a very cool set piece. I get what you're saying. Sarah sent me a text about the exact same section, and I get that it goes on for a while and it's like repetitive in its own way. But if you look at it as like an extended thing, it starts out idyllic and ends in chaos and despair.
What are you talking about? It starts off, you can't get it up, and it's a disaster.
He doesn't get it up the first time, but he gets it up multiple times after that. But like, the fact that he doesn't get it up the first time becomes the thing that he hates her for at the end, where he says like, "Oh, you must be fucking all these old men because you said this thing about like, well, that happens to everyone. So you must be like having sex with all these other old guys. I'm not the only one." And it becomes like really mean-spirited and falls apart in a way that I think is really beautiful. Like, I think that set piece as like an idyllic, like 50 pages of this book where it's like, here is two people have a chance. They have a chance. Like, guess the only time that Gibbs has a chance. He's won the lottery by winning the horse races. He's met up with Amy, who's uber rich. She takes him in, it has a shower and like no chaos in her apartment. And it all goes to shit so fast.
That scene too, it's sort of indicative of, people talk about both of these novels as novels of systems. And I don't really read them as the system crushing the individual. I think this is a perfect example of where the system itself provides Gibbs with all of these material opportunities to do and be whatever he wants to be, which is allegedly a writer. And it's his own sort of, Nick might have called it cynicism or sloth or whatever it is. I think there's a difference between I don't read these books as systems crushing individuals. It's a system that allows an individual to opt out of what their stated goals and purposes are. And I think that's what Gibbs is like. He sort of realizes, he sees how the sausage is made and decides for himself. It's not taken away from him. Does that make sense?
Can I ask you a question about that as a follow-up? Like that's in the Friends and essay as well about the system novels. What does system novel mean to you? I think it means something. I think I might be either wrong about how I'm using the term or like have a different vibe on it. But like, what does system novel mean when you're using it in that way?
For me personally, I think of it as coming through the modern tradition of begins with sort of this idea of every man against major events of history. And so it's the idea of how can one individual, on the one hand, be sort of the protagonist of their own story, and then how does that spread through into a larger level? So, like, to me, it's everything from, you know, you can even make an argument like Augie March's like that, which is how does one person fit into this larger system of America or not? And then I think you've got other novels which come from a different tradition, which might be, you know, we might call them more personal and more intimate, which are, I think, you know, there's a lot of discussion about this at the moment. For example, what are novels, contemporary novels, that are happy to deal with person, individual, online, in the economy, in the internet, and what are the ones that are like, let's get all these people in a country house on the weekend and cell service goes down and you've just got person versus person.
Right.
I think, yeah, I don't know. I had to do a lot of like post-structuralist stuff at university, and
I have no university backing, so like everything that I think about these things is like on my own. But one of the things I think is interesting about I don't know, the way that I think about it as a system novel is like it sets certain things in play with certain natural motions, and things trend towards these certain poles. And as they trend towards these certain poles, the system is created, and it's very hard to win if you're not part of that.
Well, I think that's true. And Nick and I had we had thought that by this point of the podcast, you're probably sick to death of talking about entropy.
No, I love entropy.
Well, also, if any actual physicists are listening, please block your ears, because my terrible working understanding of it, as we might talk about it here, it's about disorder within a closed system. So to me, that's something that, you know, you can follow this through, as we have many times, through Pynchon, Gas, all the way up to, say, David Foster Wallace and his last novel, which is about the tax. And that, again, that's a perfect example of, you know, that's a closed system where it's sort of disorder within there, but there's only so many rules.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is an interesting tradition. I think here for me, the closed system also is like the telephone, which is something that is so important, especially in this scene. But a telephone is something that, for example, you have to answer its call. You can't not. You have to be where it is and you have to answer its call. Whereas new systems, I think, like, say, the way we talk about the internet is really different. It's not a closed system in the same way.
That's true. Like the receiver end of it. But there's like, is it Shannon's the last name? I can't think of the person's first name, but you know what I'm talking about with the idea of information, that he worked at Bell. Okay. And made essentially the theory about entropy as related to information over telephone lines.
Right.
How most information is coded to be redundant. And the number of redundancies you have allows for the maximum amount of information to be conveyed accurately. So like if I say something once, like we're doing here on the podcast, like sometimes your videos fail. My videos failed. Sometimes your audio fails for me. And like for me to guess what you're saying, you've included redundancies in your speech in which I know what you're talking about, even though I didn't hear the exact thing. Like there's a guy, Claude Shannon, who came up with like the mathematical theory on how that plays out through telephones. And I feel like this book is that played out. It's like everyone gets about 70% of things, but never quite the whole bit.
Well, I think too, that's a really good point. It comes back to what we're talking about, joking about at the start, is like, what could you do while you're reading this book?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I'm not sure if it was, but I think it was Marshall McLuhan who talks about the telephone as the first mass communication that demands complete participation, in the way that up to that point, you know, obviously a letter, you can open it or not. You can read it when you want. The message doesn't change. Telegram is the same thing. And I think that's something that I was thinking about as I was reading particularly this section, is this idea, you know, because that's like happening with Rhoda. It's this whole, the phone's going. But if they stop answering the phone, then also the financial system stops.
Right. And but you're personally tied to answering the phone.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, like everyone complains about how many emails you get a day, but you can open them or not. You can answer them or not. They're still there. It's different, right?
Yeah, and Gibbs keeps answering the phone because he's hoping that Amy calls him back.
Yeah, and instead he ends up doing super deals for the JR company of families, which is what we want to hear.
Nothing's quite as funny as like when he answers the call from the guy that owns the film company, Erebus.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're a piece of shit. You make terrible movies. You're fucking the worst. Like, this is great. Like, let's totally buy you because you make terrible movies and I'll never stop.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, what? He's like, what? I'm just gonna call you JB, like, or BF, bloody fucker.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of interesting. I'd been watching this documentary about the Barnes Foundation and how, you know, that got moved against all these.
Yeah.
But that you know, there's a big section in this documentary about how you can, you know, we talk about closed system and boards and governance. If you can just keep adding rows in these sorts of things too, which makes it an interesting way of expanding the reach. And that's sort of what JR does too. Is he adds Bast, and then there's the, you know, the amount of shares are like, well, if there's only 5 shares and I can only have one of them, why don't I just add 100 more and then control them?
They win, or is that the line?
Well, that's the thing.
But then I see another side. I mean, I guess because then there is this question of purpose, and Gibbs struggles with it in the end, which is like he doesn't have a purpose. He's not you know. In the end, my reading of it is Gibbs comes back to this manuscript that he worked on years ago, always been holding this, you know, this torch, and that if only he could. Here he has his chance. Doesn't have a job, got the money, got rid of his bad wife, got a new girl, is perfect. Now's the opportunity. Obviously, there's the pressure with the new ideal girlfriend to succeed. But like, he looks at the manuscript, and you know, it's silly, and so then he's like, oh fuck, I don't have a purpose, and his purpose can't be, or he thinks his purpose can't be, just being in love with Amy, and so he's fucked.
Do you know
but I think that's the same for Bast too. And Eigen as well, the actual writer, the novelist, is a sellout, and he dates his friend's stepmom, you know, and there is no purpose. I mean, even JR, the reading I get is, yeah, he's into making money because he lives in America and whatnot, but also he's really lonely, right? I mean, the scenes where he's walking down the street, Bast, totally, I mean, kind of sentimental, but it's like, oh, give him a hug.
Well, there's some line about Gaddis. I don't know if he said it or he agrees, but it's this idea that, you know, the figure of JR, it's about being claimed by the American dream before you can even understand what it is. And I think that is something about JR, is that like, he doesn't have greed in an acquisitive sense. Like, he's not trying to buy a property in Mar-a-Lago or anything. It's just, it's very hard, I think, to understand exactly what drives him to do what he does, apart from, what is it, like maybe loneliness or...
Yeah, his parents aren't around. His parents are too busy working. I mean, it's a pretty, you know...
His parents are super poor, though, too.
I wish I was in the stock market when my parents were.
Yeah, his parents are working all the time, right? So they're not there, and his parents are working all the time because they need to make money to live. Therefore, they're not looking after their kid. Therefore, he's got this absence, and he fills it with trading.
I have a question about that. Do his parents make enough money to live? Like, he's always described as having like the worst clothes. Everything's always off. Like, he's alone. He doesn't have like he's disheveled. He's like the poor kid at this school. He doesn't live in a normal place like the rest of them.
I read that like biographically as, you know, Gaddis was shipped off to boarding school basically because he was underfoot, not because they couldn't afford him. And I thought this is one of those like Freudian.
Wait, are we talking about JR or Gibbs? Sorry.
Yeah, JR. Like,
yeah.
I read early on, there's some line about his mum always working extra shifts and stuff like that because they need the money. And he definitely...
Wait, does he have a dad?
I think it's unclear.
That lives with him? I don't think he does.
He's kind of looking for a father figure, right? I mean, Bast...
Everyone has a dad.
Is father.
I mean, yeah, sorry. I understand biology. However, that like he doesn't have a dad who currently lives with him.
Yeah, I don't recall there being a dad on the scene.
There's not really a parent either. There's not really.
I think that his mom is barely. I feel like they live in the. I didn't grow up in Long Island, and neither of you did either. But I feel like there was a part of Long Island at this point in time where it was like very shantytown-esque, and like you're just like on the edges of things, and like you got into these schools where there were very rich people who had these very like impressive mansions, and there are people who are like very much not. And JR is one of those very much nots. And he's like, well, how can I? And it's not even like how can I get ahead? It's like, what is there to do? This thing is great. It's sort of like Robin Hood. Like I start to make money on weed stocks, and you're like, how can I make more money?
Well, he wants to make money selling weed, right?
Yeah. Well, then you just buy weed and sell it.
He doesn't make
easier than stocks.
The scenes where the kids are trading urine samples is pretty fucking amazing.
God damn it, Nick. You're never allowed on another podcast till the end.
This is supposed to be educational, Nicholas.
A what?
This is supposed to be educational, this podcast.
Up to this point, up to page 647.
But they're doing that in the beginning of the book.
Yeah, they are. They do. They do the thing where they like where they talk about all the drug people, all the kids that have like the high drug tests.
There's some of the craziest
he dies.
Some of the craziest dialogue is when early on when they go into the whoever poor old Decephalus is going into the men's bathroom and getting in crazy conversations with the crazy gym teacher, and while they're in the kind of stands, the kids are trading urine samples. It's
get past the random drug test that happened.
Yeah, they're getting urine from the clean kids.
Yep,
and they're dealing drugs.
I mean, who hasn't bought urine before? Really,
I have been approached for urine. I've never sold. Yeah,
that's interesting. Love it.
You'll never know. I'm not going to incriminate myself on a podcast. For you both, which is on page 623. I thought it might be good, just because we're talking about 100 years difference. It's a page of notes of typewritten notes with annotations about things that were going on in the year 1920.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that jumped out for me was
Melba.
Yeah, that's also, we said we weren't going to talk about classic Aussie rock, Nick, so leave Nelly Melba out of it.
I want you to. I need a song for this week.
There's a comment, handwritten comment that says, the arts must accept the new conditions and make the most of them. And I'm wanting to drop that in terms of, this is 1920, so it's not so far away from that New Deal, what is it called, American Work Program, where they just got artists and writers to, paint the side of a bus shelter or, write the menu at a, whatever it is. Do you think we're also in this is this sort of like cyclical, this sort of like crisis sort of mode of the arts?
I mean, isn't there, like, with the entropic idea, is that every once in a while there's an influx that keeps a certain part of the system afloat. So like, that's the entropic ideal that you're talking about, or not ideal, but the entropic situation is the Amy and Gibbs situation. Sure. It's a closed system. It's the two of them. It's that. And the only way that you can sustain that is that there's an outside force of positivity that gives you money or growth or like energy. On the most basic level, it's energy. But like, I think that WPA is what you're talking about. That is needs to cycle back every so often, because you need to prop everything up to let it fall apart. To prop everything up to let it fall apart.
Doing that now, right? Or at least
theoretically,
arts people are talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean, that section there too is at a 50-year distance from when Gaddis is writing this. This book comes out in 71, which
doesn't it come out in 74?
Oh, 70, yeah. Or maybe
he's writing in 71.
Yeah, well, yeah, that all that time, but
or 71. No, yeah. It won the 1975 or 74 National Book Award.
Mike, sort of like, are you guys into that idea of like a cyclical? I like what you said there, Chad, about like you need this somehow, this exterior energy needs to come in. Like that's the argument about, supposed perpetual motion machines is there's never going to be one that doesn't expend more in doing the action than it can conserve.
Right. Right. You need, like, the only way that works is that there's some other piece of some other form that allows the energy to exist. But at the same time, the cyclical thing is, this is going to tie into what you do, Nick, and what we've done relatedly, is that there is like various theories about how things come back every 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And there's the swinging. You go in one direction for 10 years. Once you hit the peak, you sort of swing back the other way. So like right now, like I saw someone on Twitter talking about like very small novels. Everyone's like translating small novels or publishing small novels. This is the opposite of that. This will be very popular again in 5 years, if it's not now. Like if the moment is X, the opposite will be true in a short period of time. Like we'll always react to things. And the perpetual motion machine is like the reaction to that.
Yeah. I was thinking also in the sense of, this idea that we're used to hearing the argument, I think, that, why should we prop up the arts? Why should, the opera get all this money if it can't make its own? Why should a publishing house XYZ get all this funding? But, another takeaway I had from this book and these companies is that all of these industries are getting propped up from that's that entropic quality of the closed system, is that they can't make any money off this without
tax loss.
Yeah, you literally described the last system. So the guy who owns the New York Mets, neither of you are baseball fans. The guy who owns the New York Mets, his money to buy the Mets came through buying shorts on GameStop and all these other places. Like he ran a hedge fund to create the money to invest in that. Like it is a false thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like closer to home for me, at least, there's this idea that the mining industry props up the economy in Australia. But if you look at the tax credits you get to pull all this once ever material out of the ground, it's not something that makes a lot of money. It's something that needs a hell of a lot of support to then create jobs. And I think, the argument at the arts and publishing is the same. Is, you need to, it's all sort of circulating. But I think, like what Nick was saying before, what's interesting here is, we talk about Gibbs, is Nick's pretty low on Gibbs, I think, in terms of you don't see him as there's a figure, right? In terms of he has his opportunities and he doesn't do it, but also his project isn't necessarily worthwhile.
Do you know what the opening paragraph of Agape is? Okay, here we go. I'm not going to read you the first paragraph. I'm going to read the This is the you can't see it. This is Gaddis's final book.
Right. But isn't Agape written by Gibbs in a way?
In a way, but it isn't. His name isn't listed anywhere in the beginning part. So if you just pick this book up, you wouldn't have that. You would have been like, okay, I've heard of this Gaddis guy. This is very short. Like it's 100 and I don't know, like 40 pages, 20 pages, 120 pages, less than that, 112. Yeah. And the beginning is, no, but you see, I've got to explain all this because we don't know how much time there is left. And I have to work on to finish this work of mine while I brought this whole pile of books, notes, pages, clippings, and God knows what, get it all sorted and organized. When I get this property divided up and the business and worries that go with it, well, they keep me up here to be cut up and scraped and stapled and cut up again. And damn leg, look at it, layered with staples like that old suit of Japanese armor in the dining hall. That is this book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't there a machine that
my problem with Gibbs, I guess that, I actually think Gibbs is quite sympathetic when he has the crisis. It's the pre-crisis Gibbs, the uber confident, sexually, amazing character for doesn't seem any reason really, that I find a problem. Once he fails, I start to think of him as a real character. It's the pre stuff, which I'm like, oh, I don't really get it.
Huh. Wait till you get older.
Yeah. Well, but that's what I'm saying. I think when he fails is when I believe him. It's when, for example, he gets Amy, you know, who is the most attractive person in, you know, and I do think we don't have to talk about this, but I do worry there's a bit of this book is a little bit misogynistic.
Oh yeah, but it like tells is misogynistic.
It's definitely and she falls for him, but the only experiences they've had together, he's wasted, falling over. She has to pay for him. You know, I mean, why would she? There's never any reason why she would for him, and yet she does.
Actually, I have a question for both of you related to that, because we talked about this last week as to like why she cares for him. And Brian put forth the idea that he is one of the artists that she wants to protect. The thing I want to put forth to you related to that is that we see 2 instances of them together before this scene, but I think that they know each other prior to that. I think there's a lot of stuff that's off screen that has like a background to it, the same way that like Stella and Bast have a background and Stella and Gibbs have a background. Like there are these parts that are not talked about in this moment, because like when he gets on the train and she comes on there, they're very familiar.
They work at the school together.
What's that?
They teach at the school together.
Yeah, but I think it seems like more than that.
I didn't pick up on anything more familiar than say like what Nick was saying, but
okay, maybe I might be totally wrong then, but like it seemed to me like they had interacted at school or interacted like enough that it wasn't just like, oh hey, I randomly know you.
I think that I found that part the worst, and I think it's probably because I found that the most misogynistic part of the book.
Weirdly, like I think the office scenes where she walks in and they're like, "Can I fuck your tits?" are like the worst misogyny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of, but somehow, you know, like I don't mind the characters being awful. I mean, the worst character is Major Hyde, right? Major Hyde is the
worse than Davidoff.
He's the racist. He's the racist, you know, villain. But you know, like it's, you know, he's the villain. I find the Gibbs character who is just a kind of drunk failure, and yet we're meant to, you know, love him and understand how sexually attractive he is. I just didn't quite get. And I quite, you know, I mean, the real problem is that the female characters are all characterized by their sexual attractiveness.
Dude, you work in book publishing. You've seen how people treat, like, yeah, I agree with you.
Stella,
but there's people who get away with certain things that
Stella,
are really.
Amy, Rhoda.
Well, and then the other end of it too.
All of them as their looks.
They're so old and, you know, have never had children. It's the same sort of continuum, isn't it?
They're not, but how old are these characters?
Yeah. Well, we know JR is 11. We know that.
JR's 11.
Yeah. And isn't someone else says that they're 29 in here? Oh no, wait, sorry, that's a different book I'm reading.
I have a question. I mean, did this feel like 1971-ish to you?
It feels like 2020 to me.
It feels like 1975 to me.
Like I wasn't alive then or anything, or I'm not even American, but I don't know. I again, going back to, I was sort of surprised, but then at the same time, I'd been reading a lot about James Baldwin and his life in the village, and when I read the recognitions, that did feel like that time, and I was very surprised when I read it that I'd always associated Gaddis with this kind of time, the 70s maximalist postmodern thing. And I was very pleasantly surprised at how sort of avant the recognitions was. But it was I don't know, it was a funny one to me to read this one. I didn't feel a lot of the zeitgeisty things that I've been led to understand we're meant to feel about the Vietnam era. I don't know. This is definitely off topic, but given it's a book that he's taken 20 years to write, I think those sorts of things are interesting for me to consider, which is this is an idea that he's had for, 20 years before when it's appearing. The sources, the ideas that animate this, yeah.
I have a theory about that, and then we should like wrap up and give some favorite lines. But my theory about that is that his what you're saying sort of implies the system part of it, the entropic system, is that in the 50s, he sees this system and the end of it. Like how does it peter out? How does it go awry? And like gives the speech and lets the people speak and lets the people be them. And they will lead this whole system into chaos and entropy and like nonsense, in which things are disconnected from meaning. Things are not worthwhile, but are on paper. Like there's a lot of discord between what you believe in and what is valued. Like a lot of that comes out, but it feels like you see that in 1960, 1958. And it's just like, it just takes a little while for it all to fall apart.
Yeah, I think, and that's what's interesting too, is that the 50s, America's coming into one of those really buoyant moments, I guess, of the post-war, the consumerist decades. I think you're right, Chad. This sort of like entropic idea is very interesting when you think of the way that the novels do connect in terms of systems, because they're very different, as you said. When I read them, I think of them as two very different novels, but you've got to think about, I think, the way that they're coming maybe from the same animus or not.
Right. Or like it sets forth the rules, and the rules of the system don't ever quite coalesce. Like it feels like very much like, oh shit, what was the guy, Bernard, oh my God. I had one beer too many as we drank this, but the guy that like believed that they could create believed they could create a system of numbers. And then there's like Gödel's theorem. That's like, it never quite works.
Yeah.
Like it never works. And like everything at that point in time in the 50s, 60s, like the recognitions, JR, these moments were moments in time in which when he was writing it, people believed that those systems could be perfect. There's Epcot Center. There's like this idea that like we can create the perfect system. And he's always like, no.
Yeah.
You really can't. It's not going to work on this level. It's not going to work on this level.
Well, and that's what I bring up in terms of that 70s thing is, if you look at what else is being written, I think it comes around the same year as Rabbit Redux.
Mm-hmm.
And is to me, I haven't read that for a very long time, and I doubt I'd read it again, but that's very much a novel that looks back on a system of being and thought and being American, that the whole idea for Rabbit is that it does and doesn't work out in sort of quite traditional ways. And then, then looking to France, this is an era where you're starting to, you've had things like Claude Lévi-Strauss. It's just, to me, it's very interesting to sort of situate it historically. And I mean, that's coming at it from a systems point of view, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I thought this book was kind of timeless, and I know that in the other episodes people have said this. I mean, it feels pretty contemporary. I mean, the TV screens and the streaming of things in the schools and the high finance stuff. I mean, just saying GameStop and everything, it's all right there. Well, I kind of think with Recognitions, the 50s bohemian stuff felt a bit dated to me.
I'm looking, and it's also the same year that Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas came out, and also Mr. Tickle and Mr. Happy by Roger Hargreaves. So
wow,
that's a bit of a zeitgeist for you.
Holy shit. I have to make one last comment, is that the part where they're talking about selling encyclopedias and they're selling the first volume in supermarkets, and like, we'll give you this one, blah, 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 we'll give you volume 4. My mom bought every single volume 1 thing from supermarkets. When I grew up, I was born in this era. I'm from 1975. Yeah. So like in this era, my mom bought every first album where it'd be like, introduce your kids to classical music. Here's Beethoven, volume 1 of a 24 volume set. It's only 99 cents. The next volumes will be $12.99. She bought that every time. Every we knew from A through Z. Like we knew nothing. Like we knew the beginning of stuff. Yeah. And that shows up here wonderfully. So what's your favorite line, guys?
Oh, yeah. Nick, you go first.
Don't steal mine or I'll kill you.
No, you go first. I'm still looking.
I'm on 626. These are 2 Rhoda bits, and they're not connected, but I love them both so much I can't choose. This is her talking. No, look, man. I mean, look, like, you're this fucking bank, right? So I mean, like, you're so hard up for this fucking money. Go look in your fucking bank vault. That's where, like, oh wow.
Yeah.
No, man. I mean, look, like, I mean, you don't give news to newspapers. You get news out of newspapers. I mean, like, that's what newspapers are for.
Yeah, she's great. She's
So good.
Favorite bits.
I have one 579, which is back to the funerals. She said he sounded quite ecstatic to learn that $2 billion was spent on funerals last year, and you simply must tell him that the death rate is climbing steadily. Imagine, only 180 million funerals in America since our dear country was born, and we count on 200 million in just the next 45 years.
I cracked up at that so hard last night. I was reading this, I couldn't stop laughing.
I'll do the Alaska part, the misspelling of Alaska. 598. Yeah. Well, look, he's a lawyer, isn't he? And this law firm you got out there, Milliken Mudge, whatever it is that represents this gas business, let him talk to Senator Milliken about gas exploration and all the rest of this Alsaca. What? What do you mean who changed it? Nobody did. You, because you spelled it that way in the memos you sent out that nobody dares. Look, I know how to spell Alaska. You spelled it ALSA because I know you did. Piscator sent me your memo when he registered the. Yes, you did. You did so. You look. Goodbye. I'm not going to spend the rest of the. What? One more little thing. Listen, we talked about that. I said I wasn't going to. Didn't I? No. Now wait. What do you mean take the bus? What?
So good. That's such a good reading too. Love this book.
Yeah.
Hey Nick, is there anything from NYRB that you'd plug right now that's coming out? Pay attention to. Right, they are. They want.
Go on to community bookstore. Anna Kana Schofield is talking to Ela Fatiman.
I keep not remembering that you guys are publishing that because of various reasons. Like, I just keep forgetting that it's like one of your books.
It's a new. It's not the classics. It's the
right. It's the new thing. I really want to read that book. Anna Schofield is amazing. She's phenomenal. And Bina is the book you're talking about.
Yeah, Bina's the one. Bina is actually.
Bina. Is it Bina?
The first line of the book is it's pronounced Bina, not Bina.
Cool. If I had a copy of it, Mr. Publicity, I would know that.
No. I send you translation, Chad. You only get translation.
I don't. What the fuck? I'm also editing a fucking series of American books. Okay.
Well, you publish
anything that you're? Yeah, I do. Sam, anything that you're working on that you want to promote?
I'll find a copy. Hang on.
If it's Lauren Euler, Sam, we don't want to.
I have a new translation out, which is with Scribe. It's called Prosopagnosia by Sonia Hernandez. It's a very weird book about motherhood, a girl who gets face blindness, which is what prosopagnosia is, disgusting ibises, a fake Mexican artist. It's short and weird. As Chad says, we only do short, weird translations now. That's where the market is.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah, cool cover. It's very fun. Have a look at it.
I almost dated someone with that.
And what, she couldn't remember you or what?
No, we met multiple times and we kept having the same near romantic connection.
Jeez, that's like the opposite of that movie with Adam Sandler, isn't it?
I guess so. I never saw that movie, but like it was literally like it would lead to a point and be like, well, we know each other, and she'd be like, I don't know who you are.
I can't help it. I can't help it. Everything is boring now. I can't help it. I can't help it. An emoji for each stage of grief. Man, good luck looking good in anything. Human trash is everywhere, and the highlights get older every year. Everything is boring now. I can't help it. I can't help it. Exactly, Kevin.